"Look at it, boy," the master said, loud enough for the whole forecourt to hear. "A man dressed as a doorknob. They put a fur hat on a hat stand and tell themselves it guards a king." He was talking about the sentry, and he was talking to me, and he wanted the gentlemen of the press to write it down. That was the thing you learned first about Master Goran Vessel, the greatest sculptor in the kingdom. He never said a cruel thing quietly. Cruelty, like marble, was meant to be displayed. I was 19 that spring, and I had carried Master Vessel's chisels for 3 years, and I had learned to keep my face as smooth as a finished plinth no matter what came out of his mouth. So I kept it smooth now. But I looked, the way he told me to look, at the man he was insulting, and the man did not so much as breathe wrong. The sentry stood at the foot of the great covered statue in the inner court of Harrowmere Palace, in the red wool tunic, and the tall black bearskin and the white gloves, the rifle at the slope, his eyes fixed on the middle distance as if Master Vessel were a pigeon and not the most celebrated artist alive. He had been set there to guard the Unveiling, Master Vessel's masterwork, the colossal figure of the kingdom's founder that had taken 4 years and would stand in the court forever. In 2 days the king himself would draw the cord, and the canvas would fall, and the whole realm would see what we had made. What we had made, there it is, the word I was not allowed to say. "He won't even blink," Master Vessel announced, delighted, circling the sentry the way he circled a block of stone he meant to humble into beauty. "Watch." I could tell this man his mother's house was burning and he would stand there like a Kotrak. There is no mind in there, boys. There is no soul. He is exactly what I make a shape that looks like a man, except I make mine better. The other apprentices laughed because they had to. There were 5 of us. I will tell you their names because their names matter to this story more than the master's does. There was Pell, who was the eldest, with hands cracked from 20 winters of stone dust. There was Call and Hewen, the brothers, who had come down out of the quarry country with nothing but their backs. There was little Sennet, who was only 15 and frightened of everything. And there was me, Aldous Wren, who had not yet learned that being good with a chisel and being seen as good with a chisel are 2 different kingdoms. We had carved that statue. Master Vessel had designed it. I will give him that fully and without grudging, because he was a genius, and a genius is a real and terrible thing. But the hand that smoothed the founder's cloak so it seemed to move in wind was Pell's hand. The hand that cut the eyes that everyone would say were so alive, so haunting, the eyes that would make the king go quiet, those were mine. We worked 12 hours and 14 and once, near the end, a stretch of 2 days with sleep snatched on the scaffold, and Master Vessel came and went and adjusted and corrected and signed his name to all of it. And he despised us for needing him. That was the part I could never understand. He needed us as much as we needed him more, because a design is only a drawing until a hand makes it stone. But he had decided, somewhere in his great career, that to admit a debt was to admit a weakness, and he would sooner break a man than thank him. So he stood in the forecourt of the palace and mocked a sentry to teach us, his apprentices, what he thought of men who served and were not famous. "You there," he called to the guard. "Yes, you, the statue with the gun. Tell me, do you know who I am?" The sentry did not answer. He was not permitted to answer. That, of course, was the whole sport of it. "He doesn't know," Master Vessel told the press, spreading his hands. "He has stood in that court for an hour beside the greatest work of his age, and he does not know whose work it is. They are the same, you see. The guard and the gun and the statue under the cloth, all of them put there to stand still and be looked at. The difference is that mine is beautiful, and his is paid by the day." I want to be honest about that morning because I have told this story 100 times since, and each time I am tempted to make myself braver in it. I was not brave. I laughed too, a small, sick laugh, the kind you give to keep a powerful man from turning toward you. I have carried that laugh for a long time. It is heavier than any block of marble I ever lifted. The sentry's name, I would learn, was Trooper Edmund Halloran. But that morning he had no name. He was a shape Master Vessel had decided to use, the way he used all of us to make himself feel large. We worked through the afternoon under the canvas, doing the last of the fine work by lantern light in the tented dark around the statue's base. Master Vessel did not work. Master Vessel received visitors, a baron, a gallery man from the southern cities, a lady who wrote about art for the broadsheets and laughed at everything he said. He brought them into the tent to show them the work, and he spoke as though the work had grown there overnight like frost on a window. "The hands took me weeks," he told the lady, running his own soft fingers down the founder's stone fingers. "Each knuckle, I would not let a journeyman near them. I had cut those knuckles." Pell stood 3 feet away with the very rasp he had used to cut them still in his belt, and Pell said nothing, because Pell had a wife and a sick daughter, and a place in the only workshop in the kingdom that mattered, and a man with a sick daughter does not contradict the master who feeds her. But I saw Pell's jaw. I saw the muscle in it stand out like a cord, and I saw little Senate, 15, watching Pell's jaw and learning the lesson the master taught best, that this was what skill earned you: silence and a lie told over your bent head, and the privilege of being despised by the man who needed you. That was the workshop. That was Master Goran Vessel. And I would not be telling you any of it if the next 2 days had gone the way every day before them had gone. The master grand, the apprentices silent, the world applauding the name on the plinth. But on the second evening, the founder's statue cracked. I was the one who found it. It was past the 10th hour, and the visitors were gone, and the master was gone to his lodgings to rest his genius, and we 5 were left to polish the lower drapery by lantern. I had climbed the inner scaffold to check a seam near the figure's left shoulder. I had a bad feeling about that seam, the kind of feeling you get in your hands before you get it in your head, and when I brought the lantern close I saw it. A line. A hairline, fine as a thread, running up out of the deep fold of the stone cloak and into the load-bearing mass of the shoulder, where the great raised arm met the body. The arm that held the founder's sword aloft. The heaviest cantilever in the whole figure, 4 tons of marble reaching out over the heads of everyone who would stand beneath it. I put my thumb to the line, and my thumb went cold. I had cut stone since I was a boy. I knew the difference between a surface scratch and a thing that goes down. This went down. I tapped beside it with the back of my chisel, and the sound came back dead. Not the bright ring of sound marble, but the dull, swallowed thud of stone with a fault running through it. "Pell," I said, and I heard my own voice shake. "Pell, come up here." He came up. He looked. He went the color of the lantern smoke. "How deep?" he said. "I don't know, deep. The sound's wrong all along the fold." Call and Hewen came up, and then we did not say anything for a while. The 4 of us crowded on the scaffold staring at a thread of dark in white stone, because we all knew the same 3 things at once. We knew the statue would be unveiled in front of the king in 2 days. We knew that the raised arm, if that fault ran where the sound said it ran, could let go not now, not tomorrow, but in a month, in a year, the first hard frost that got into the crack and froze and widened it. And 4 tons of marble and a stone sword would come down into a court where, on feast days, children sat on their fathers' shoulders to watch the guard. And we knew, the 4th thing, the worst thing, that the man who had to be told was Master Goran Vessel, who had stood in this court 2 days ago and sworn before the press and the gallery man, and the lady from the broadsheets that the work was flawless, that it was the finest thing the age had made, that he would stake his name on every inch of it. We knew what it would cost him to hear that his masterwork was cracked. And we knew, all of us, in the particular way that men know the weather of a master they have served for years, exactly how he would take it. He would not take it as a thing to be fixed. He would take it as an attack. Pell sent the brothers down. He sat on the scaffold beside me with his cracked hands hanging between his knees, and he was quiet for a long time. "We have to tell him," I said. "I know what we have to do," Pell said. "I'm thinking about what he'll do. He'll want to fix it." He'll want it not to be true. Pell looked at me, and there was something in his face I had not seen before, not fear of the master which I had seen every day, but something older and sadder. Aldous, you're young, hear me. A man like Vessel, when the thing he's built his whole self on starts to crack, he doesn't fix the crack. He looks for the man to blame for finding it. I did not understand him then. I understood him very well 2 days later. We told the master at dawn. He came into the tent in his good coat, smelling of the wine he drank to sleep, and Pell took him up the scaffold and showed him the line, and the master put his thumb to it the way I had, and tapped it the way I had, and listened to the dead sound the way I had. And then Master Goran Vessel did a thing I will remember until I die. He laughed. That, he said, that's a surface line, a bruise in the polish. You woke me for that. Tap it, master, Pell said quietly. Listen to it, it's not a bruise. The arm's bedding has a fault if it goes. It will not go. The master's voice had a new edge in it, fine and cold. Do you imagine I do not know my own stone? I chose this block myself from the Aldermere quarries, the soundest white in the kingdom. I have built a colossus on this arm. Do you suppose a man who can do that does not know a fault from a scratch? I'm not saying you don't know stone, Pell said. He was being so careful. I have never seen a man be so careful. I'm saying the block lied to you. It happens. The best block in the world can have a vein you can't see from outside, and you don't find it till the load's on it and the weight finds it for you. Nobody's at fault. We just have to. Nobody's at fault. The master turned the words over like a man tasting something gone off. No, you're right about that, Pell. Nobody is at fault because nothing is wrong. He came down off the scaffold. He brushed the dust off his good coat with 2 fingers. I unveil in 2 days. The king draws the cord. And you will not, any of you, say one more word about a crack that does not exist. Do you understand me? Not to me, not to each other, and not, God help the man who does it, to anyone outside this tent. And that, I thought, was the end of it. The master had spoken. The master always won. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the apprentices' loft over the workshop stables, and I did the sum over and over. 2 days, the king, the court full of people, the arm, the frost that would come, if not this winter then the next. I am not a brave man, I have told you that. I laughed in the forecourt with the rest, but I found, lying in the dark, that I could not make the sum come out any way but one. If I said nothing and the arm held for years, I would have spent those years waiting for a sound. And if I said nothing and it did not hold, then somewhere a long way off, on some ordinary feast day, the thing I had helped to carve would fall on people who had come to look at it, and I would have known, and I would have laughed in a forecourt, and I would have said nothing. I could not carry that. I had already learned how heavy one small laugh could be. So in the gray before dawn, I climbed down out of the loft, and I walked across the cold cobbles of the inner court to the one man I could think of who was not afraid of Master Goran Vessel. The sentry. He was a different man than the one the master had mocked. They changed the watch in the night, but he stood the same, in the same red and black, the rifle at the same slope, his eyes on the same middle distance, in front of the same covered colossus. I stopped a respectful distance off, the way you were meant to, and I did not know how to begin, because you are not supposed to speak to them, and they are not supposed to answer. I know you can't talk to me, I said. I'm sorry, there's something wrong with the statue, the arm. It's cracked and the master won't hear it, and the king's coming and there'll be people standing right under it, and I don't know who to tell. The sentry did not move. I had not really expected him to. I felt foolish, talking to a wall, the way the master had said a shape that looked like a man. And then, without turning his head, without shifting his eyes from the middle distance, the sentry spoke. Just 5 words, low and even, barely moving his lips. What time does your master rise? I almost wept, I think, from the simple relief of being heard. 8, I said. He'll be in the tent at 8. Stand at your work as usual, the sentry said, in that same flat murmur, his eyes never leaving the air in front of him. Say nothing to anyone. When the officer of the watch comes to me at the change at 7, I will report a matter of safety in the court. That is something I am permitted and required to do. After that, it is out of your master's hands and out of yours. Go back before you're missed, boy, and in the faintest pause you did right. I went back across the cold cobbles with my heart going like a hammer, and I climbed into the loft, and for the first time in 2 days I slept. I want to tell you what I did not know then, because it changes how you hear everything that came after. I did not know that the sentry, Trooper Edmund Halloran, though I still did not have his name, had been a quarryman's son before he was ever a soldier. I did not know that he had grown up in the stone country, in the hard villages above the Aldermere cuttings, where the men went down into the white pits and not all of them came up, and where every child learned before they learned their letters the one law of working stone, that the stone does not care who you are, that a flaw will kill a king's mason as quick as a beggar's, that the only thing that keeps men alive among the great weights is honesty about what the stone is doing, told plainly and in time, by whoever sees it first, even if it is the youngest and least and most frightened man on the works. I did not know that he had heard, in my shaking voice in the dark, the exact thing he had been raised to listen for, the man who has seen the fault and is afraid to be the one to say it. I only knew that I had told someone who would not look away. That turned out to be enough. The officer of the watch was a captain named Roderick Mowbray, and he did not laugh. I learned afterward how it went. At the change of the watch, Trooper Halloran made his report, exactly as he had said he would, a matter of safety, a possible structural fault in the Unveiling piece, reported to him by a workman, requiring inspection before the public ceremony. Captain Mowbray could have done many things with that report. He could have decided it was a quarrel among artists and beneath him. He could have feared Master Vessel's fame and the powerful friends who came to laugh at his side. Plenty of men in the palace would have. He did none of it. He went and looked. He came into the tent at 7:30, while we were at our work, and the master had not yet arrived, and he was not alone. He had brought the palace's own clerk of works, a careful gray man named Aldous Tarrant, who had spent 40 years making sure that nothing in Harrowmere fell down. Captain Mowbray asked, courteously, which of the workmen had raised the concern, and Pell looked at me, and there was nothing for it, so I said it was me, and I took them up the scaffold and I showed the clerk of works the line. Tarrant did not say a word for a long time. He put his thumb to it. He tapped it, all along the fold, the back of his little hammer ringing bright and then going dead, bright and then dead, mapping the silence under the stone. He took a thin steel feeler from his coat and slid it into the line and watched how far it went. He shone a glass on it. He climbed higher and looked at where the arm took its weight, and he came down very slowly, and his careful gray face had gone older. "Captain," he said, "this figure does not get unveiled in 2 days. This figure does not get unveiled at all until that arm is taken down and rebedded, and I would not stand a cat under it until it is." And that was the moment Master Goran Vessel walked into the tent. I will not soften what happened, because the softening would be a lie, and this whole story is about the cost of lies told over bent heads. He came in grand in the good coat, expecting his court. He found a captain of the guard and the palace clerk of works standing under his masterwork with grave faces, and his apprentices very still, and a steel feeler glinting in the crack he had forbidden us to name. He understood in 1 second. I watched him understand, and then I watched him decide, quick as a struck match, the way Pell had told me he would, that the thing to do with a danger you cannot deny is to find the man who exposed it and destroy him, so that the world looks at the messenger and not the message. "Who," said Master Vessel very quietly, spoke to the guard. Nobody answered. "Who?" louder now. He was looking at us at his 5, going down the line of us like a man choosing a chisel. "One of you went sniveling to a soldier with a lie about my work." One of you behind my back, after I gave a plain order, went and put it about that the greatest sculpture in the kingdom is going to fall down. I will know which. I will know now. It wasn't put about, Master, Pell said. It was reported, once, to the one man required to act on it because it's true. It is not true, the Master's voice cracked across the tent. It is a hairline, a bruise. And the moment it leaves this tent, it is not a bruise anymore, do you understand? It is a story. Vessel's colossus is cracked. Vessel's hand has failed. The great man is finished, and that story does not come from the stone. Pell, the stone is fine. That story comes from the mouth of some jealous, ungrateful little. It came from me, I said. I had not planned to say it. It came up out of me the way the truth does when you have stopped being able to hold it. The whole tent went quiet. Master Vessel turned and looked at me, Aldous Wren, 19, his chisel carrier, the boy who cut the founder's eyes that everyone would have praised him for, and his face was a thing I had never seen and hoped never to see again. It was not anger, exactly. It was the look of a man watching his own reflection crack. You, he said, after everything I have made of you. You didn't make me, Master. My voice was shaking, but it did not stop. I cut the eyes. Pell cut the cloak. Call and Hewen cut the base you showed the lady. We made the statue. You designed it, and it's a great design, and I'll say so to anyone, but the arm is cracked. I felt it in my hands before I felt it anywhere, and there are going to be children under it. I ran out of words. I couldn't laugh any more. He raised his hand. I do not know to this day whether he meant to strike me or only to point, because his career and his whole grand self were coming down around him faster than the arm ever could, and a drowning man's hand does not always know its own intent. But it came up fast and hard toward a 19-year-old boy in front of a captain of the guard. And the tent flap moved, and a man in red wool and a tall black bearskin was simply there, between the master's hand and my face. It was the sentry, Trooper Halloran. He had been relieved off the post at the change, and he had, I learned this later, asked the captain's leave to be present, because, he said, the workmen had come to him and he held himself responsible for the workmen's safety until the matter was closed. He did not seize the master. He did not strike him. He did not even raise his voice. He simply stepped in, square and immovable, the way he had stood the whole long mockery in the forecourt, and the master's raised hand stopped in the air an inch from the red wool of his chest, because there was suddenly a wall there that had not been there before, and you do not strike a wall. Sir, the sentry said, to the master, calm and level and without 1 ounce of triumph in it, the boy reported a danger to the king's court. That is the most loyal thing any man in this tent has done in 2 days. You'll not lay a hand on him for it. The master stood with his hand in the air, and his masterwork cracked above him and his apprentices behind him and the law in front of him, and slowly, his hand came down. I would like to tell you that he came to his senses then, that the genius, faced with the plain truth and the plain man holding the line of it, found the bigness in himself to say, yes, the arm is cracked. Thank God the boy saw it. Let us take it down and build it true. He did not then. Men like Master Vessel do not turn in one moment, because the self they have built is as heavy as the arm and it does not let go in a day. What he did in that moment was the only thing left to a great man whose greatness has been caught in a lie. He went silent and white, and he walked out of the tent and out of the court, and we did not see him for the rest of that day. But the matter was out of his hands now. The sentry had been right about that in the cold dark of the forecourt when he told me it would be. Once a danger to the king's court is reported and confirmed by the clerk of works, no artist's fame can bury it again. The unveiling was stopped. It was done quietly, the way the palace did everything, no scandal in the broadsheets, no announcement that Vessel's colossus had failed. A note went to the master of the household that the founder's monument required further work and the dedication would be postponed. The lady who wrote for the broadsheets was told the artist was a perfectionist and would not show the work until it satisfied him, which the lady printed, and which made the master sound finer than the truth ever could have. The palace, you see, was not trying to ruin Master Vessel. It was only trying not to let his pride kill anyone. And then the clerk of works came to the workshop to plan the repair, and the second turn of this story began, the one I did not expect, the one that taught me what the sentry had really done. Because Tarrant, the careful gray man, did not ask for Master Vessel. He asked for the men who had cut the stone. "The design is the master's," Tarrant said, standing in our workshop with his plans rolled under his arm, "and a fine one, and when it's mended the master's name goes on the plinth as it should. But mending it is not a designer's work. It's a stonecutter's. That arm has to come down without bringing the shoulder with it and be rebedded on a new bearing keyed into the sound mass and dressed back so the join can't be seen. I need the men whose hands know this stone. Who cut the cloak?" "I did," said Pell. "Who found the fault?" "I did," I said. Tarrant looked at the two of us, and at Call and Hewen, and at little Senate, who had said not one word through any of it, and who looked as though he might cry to be noticed at all. "Then it's your hands I want," Tarrant said. "Not the master's. His part is done and done well. The next part is yours. I have built many things since, in a long working life. I have never been prouder of anything than I was in the 4 weeks that followed, when the founder's arm came down off the Colossus on a cradle of ropes and timber, and Pell and I and the brothers cut a new bearing into the sound stone below the fault, and keyed it, and bedded the great arm true, and dressed the join until you would put your hand on it, and swear the stone had never been parted. Tarrant stood over us not as a master stands over apprentices, but as one craftsman watches another do work he respects, and every few days the sentry came. Trooper Halloran came on his off-watch in plain clothes now, a broad, quiet man with a quarryman's hands, and he would stand at the edge of the works and watch the stone come true. And once he climbed up and put his thumb on the new bearing and tapped it and listened, and the sound rang back bright and whole, and he nodded, and I understood that he was checking it the way his own father had once checked the cuttings, because the stone does not care who you are. "How did you know," I asked him once, "that I wasn't just a frightened boy making trouble, in the dark that morning? You couldn't even look at me." He was quiet for a while. "I grew up over the Aldermere pits," he said at last. "My father went down them 40 years and came up. A lot of men didn't. The ones who didn't, near always, it was because somebody saw the bad ground and was afraid to be the one to call it. Afraid of the foreman, or afraid of looking like a fool, or afraid of stopping the work and costing the gang a day's pay. So they kept their mouths shut and hoped, and the roof came down on men who'd have lived if one frightened lad had said the thing he was afraid to say." He looked at the new-cut bearing. "I heard your voice in the dark, boy, and I heard a lad who'd seen the bad ground and was more afraid of the silence than of the foreman. That's the only kind of man I trust on a works. I'd back that voice over a great man's word any day of the week. I have thought about that more than almost anything anyone has ever said to me." The master came back. It was near the end of the repair, on a gray afternoon, and we did not hear him come in. We had the arm bedded by then and dressed nearly true, and Pell was on the scaffold finishing the last of the join, and I looked up and Master Goran Vessel was standing in the workshop door in his good coat, looking up at the Colossus, at the arm his apprentices had taken down and built again better than it had been built before. Nobody spoke. We did not know which master had come back, the one who would destroy us or some other. He walked to the foot of the scaffold. He looked up a long time at the join, the one you could not see, the one Pell's cracked hands had dressed away to nothing. "Where is the fault?" he said, quietly, not a challenge, a real question. "You're standing under it, master," Pell said from the scaffold. "It ran from the deep fold up into the bearing. We took the arm off, cut down to the sound stone, and set it on a new bed keyed into the mass. It won't move now, not in your life or mine or your great-grandchildren's." Master Vessel put his hand on the stone of the lower cloak, the cloak Pell had cut, the cloak he had told the lady from the broadsheets he would never let a journeyman touch, and he stood there with his hand on another man's work for a long time. I could not find the join, he said. It cost him something to say it. I could hear what it cost. I have looked at it for 10 minutes and I cannot find where you parted it. That's the work, master, Pell said, gently. There was no cruelty in Pell anywhere, even now, even with the chance to be cruel hanging right there for the taking. When it's done right, you can't see it. The whole point of the work is that nobody knows we were there. And Master Goran Vessel, the greatest sculptor in the kingdom, the man who had stood in the forecourt and called a soldier a shape that looked like a man, the man who had mocked us over our bent heads for years, turned around in the workshop and looked at his 5 apprentices, and I watched something break in him that needed breaking. Not his career. His career was safe. The palace had seen to that. What broke in him was the thing that had made him cruel, the lie that he had done it alone. I designed a statue, he said slowly, as if he were learning the words. And 5 men I have treated like tools made it stand up. And one of them, he found me and held my eyes, and I made myself hold his. One of them was brave enough to tell me the truth when the truth could have ended me, knowing I would try to break him for it. And I did try. He stopped. Aldous, I did try. Yes, master, I said. There was no use pretending otherwise. And the only reason you are standing here and not turned out into the street with my boot mark on you, he said, is that a soldier I called a Kotrak put himself between my hand and your face. A man I said had no mind and no soul. He shook his head slowly. I have spent my whole life, he said, learning to see. And I could not see the one fault that mattered, in my own stone or in myself. And a quarryman's son saw both in a boy's shaking voice in the dark. He did a thing then that I do not think any man in that workshop ever expected to see Master Goran Vessel do. He took the chisel that hung at his own belt, his master's chisel, the fine one, the one none of us was ever permitted to touch, and he held it out to me. The plinth has my name on it, he said. It will always have my name on it. That is how the world keeps its accounts, and I have stopped pretending it is just. But underneath, on the back, where the founder's heel meets the stone, there is a band of plain marble that no one will ever read. I want the names cut there, all 5 of yours, in your own hands, each man his own name, so that the stone remembers what the plinth won't. Pell cut his name first, being the eldest, then Call and Hugin the brothers side by side. Then I cut mine, Aldous Wren, in the letters my father taught me. And last, the master himself lifted little Senate up onto the low scaffold, Senate 15, who had said not one word in the whole of it, who had only watched and been afraid, and steadied the boy's hand on the chisel, and let him cut his own name into the founder's heel beside the rest of ours, so that the youngest and least and most frightened of us is in that stone forever too. The dedication came at last, 3 weeks after the arm was true. The king drew the cord and the canvas fell, and the whole court saw the colossus of the founder reaching his stone, soared up over our heads, the cloak moving in a wind that was not there, the eyes alive and haunting, and the realm said it was the finest thing the age had made. And they were right. And the plinth said Goran Vessel, and the world kept its accounts the way the world does. But I stood in that court on the dedication day next to a broad, quiet man in a red wool tunic and a tall black bearskin, his rifle at the slope, his eyes on the middle distance, guarding the unveiling exactly as he had guarded it that first morning when a great man mocked him for being a shape with no soul inside. And I knew what the great man had not known, that the stillness was not emptiness. That behind the unmoving face was a quarryman's son who knew that the only thing standing between a beautiful thing and the people under it is somebody honest enough to name the fault, and steady enough to hold the line while the truth gets told. The master came up to the sentry after, when the court was emptying. I went with him because I did not want to miss it. I owe you an apology, soldier, Master Vessel said. I called you a Kotrak. I called you a shape that looked like a man. I said there was no mind in you and no soul. I was wrong in every particular, and I was wrong loudly in front of the press, which is the worst way to be wrong. I am sorry. Trooper Halloran did not move his eyes from the middle distance because he was on the post, and on the post a man does not turn for any voice. But he answered, low and even, in that same flat murmur I had first heard in the dark. You were grieving, sir, the sentry said. A man who's about to lose the thing he's built his whole self on says wild things. I've stood a lot of posts. I've been called a lot worse than a Kotrak by better men than you and worse ones. The faintest pause. Your boy did right, that's the whole of it, the rest is just noise. And that, I think, is the truest thing anyone said in the whole of it. The rest is just noise. The fame and the mockery and the great name on the plinth, and the lady who wrote for the broadsheets, and the whole grand performance of a man who could not bear to share the credit for what he made, all of it, just noise. Under the noise there was a cracked arm that would have killed people, and a frightened boy who named it, and a still man in a fur hat who would not let the truth be buried or the boy be struck for telling it. Master Vessel lived another 9 years, and they were, I think, his best. He kept the workshop, and his name stayed great, but he stopped telling the broadsheets that he would not let a journeyman touch the knuckles. When people praised the founder's eyes, he started saying, "My apprentice Wren cut those, watch him, he'll be greater than me." He never quite learned to be gentle. A genius is a real and terrible thing, and you do not unmake it. But he learned to be honest about his debts, and a man who is honest about his debts cannot be cruel in quite the old way, because cruelty needs the lie that you owe nobody anything. I have my own workshop now. I have apprentices of my own, young men with chisels and frightened faces, and I have made myself one law that I keep above every other, and I learned it in the inner court of Harrowmere from a soldier I was raised to think was furniture. The youngest and least and most frightened man on the works is the one most likely to see the fault first, because he is the one closest to the stone and least sure of his own importance. So I have taught every boy who ever carried my chisels that if he sees bad ground, he is to say it to me, to anyone, over my head if he must, and no man in my shop will ever raise a hand to him for it, because the man who names the fault is doing the most loyal work there is. They go to see the Colossus, sometimes, my apprentices. They stand in the inner court of Harrowmere and look up at the founder reaching his sword over their heads, and they read GORAN Vessel on the plinth, and they think they are looking at one man's genius. I do not correct them in the court. But back in the workshop I tell them to go round to the founder's heel, to the band of plain marble where the stone meets the plinth, and to look close, and to read the 5 names cut there in 5 different hands, and the small crooked letters of a 15-year-old boy among them, cut with a great man steadying his hand. And I tell them about the still soldier in the red wool tunic who would not let the truth be buried, and who would not let a frightened boy be struck for telling it, and who, when a great man finally apologized to him, did not move his eyes from the middle distance, and said only that the boy had done right, and that the rest was just noise. He was a shape that looked like a man, the master said. He was the truest man in that court, and the one with the most soul, and the proof of it is that he is the only one in this whole story who never once needed his name cut into anything. He just stood his post and held the line, and let the truth come down on its own weight like good stone, set true, on ground he had made sure of first. That is the kind of man a fur hat hides. I have spent my life among the makers of beautiful things, and I have never met a finer one.